Hi, Joni.
Hi Günther, can you hear and see me now?
Yes, perfect. I hear you
Perfect.
very well and very beautiful, and I'm happy to see a Finnish hero here on my podcast.
I'm happy to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me, and sorry for the technical issues with Riverside, but great that it works now.
Perfect. You're fine? We can start the recording?
We can start recording.
Very good. Perfect.
This meeting is being recorded.
I'm very happy to have a Finnish representative at my podcast where we discuss all the important issues of our time. And this, my friend, actually from Twitter, I have to say, because I admire your work, what you do, your clear stand for freedom, your support for Ukraine, and also that Finland has joined NATO, and that you criticize, of course, President Trump for not helping Ukraine much more. I would like to invite you to present yourself, your activities, what you do, also your X account, and your motivation for why you are doing all this. And please, with Sisu, we like the Finnish people, and you are my hero. Joni, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Günther. Thanks for having me. And same words. I've also been following what you post on Twitter, and lots of great work there, and lots of funny posts as well in a great way. So it's always entertaining and great to
Right.
follow what you do. It's great. Sometimes, lots of serious posts, but also many funny ones. So it's great
The world
content.
must be entertained in these terrible times, and also it's creating some attention, and that's also necessary because
Exactly.
otherwise you're lonely on Twitter.
Exactly. So yeah, I'll briefly present myself. I'm Joni Askola. I'm from Finland. I'm a PhD student, or actually a PhD candidate in public and social policy at Charles University in Prague. I do research on public policy, and then on the side, I try to help Ukraine and to also push my agenda, my ideology, which is democracy and freedom, online on X, Blue Sky, and YouTube. I started helping Ukraine in 2023 with an organization called the 69th Sniffing Brigade, which is a NAFO organization. We bring trucks and drones to Ukraine, and I started helping them in 2023. My brother was already helping them before, and I needed a way to collect money to fundraise to get trucks to Ukraine, and that's how I started posting my analysis on Twitter and on YouTube and Blue Sky, because by having followers there, I could raise money for Ukraine, and that's how it all started. So it all started as a way to help Ukraine, and since then it's gotten further. And obviously now it's not only helping Ukraine; it's also trying to influence and trying to comment and give analysis. So it's also both. But I still help Ukraine and still with the same organization, and I try to go there a couple times a year and do a couple fundraisers every year. So that's what I do.
Thanks, Joni, for doing all this important work. It's really excellent. We agreed to talk a little bit about your tweet that you don't like the Austrian neutrality. Maybe
Yeah.
you can share some views about Austrian immorality, and that would be a good starter for the whole debate this morning.
Yes. And obviously, I'm not an Austrian politics specialist in any way, but I understand something about neutrality as a Finn, because Finland used to be a neutral country, and I don't believe in the concept of neutrality at all. I think that neutrality is cowardice, and it's something that doesn't exist in reality. I think that someone who is a member of NATO is not neutral already, because if you are in NATO, sorry, not NATO, I mean EU. If you're a member of EU, you're not a neutral country, and because of that, I don't think that Finland has been neutral for a long time. I think when we joined the EU in 1995, we became a non-neutral country, and since then we have slowly moved our way. And then we decided to join NATO when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In Finland's case, obviously there's always a reason, a historic reason when you are neutral, and same applies to Austria. It's a different reason, but there's always a reason. In Finland's case, it's because it was forced on us after World War II, because we fought against the USSR, and it was part of the deal to end the war. For us to be neutral, it was forced on us. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, we had an opportunity to fully move and join NATO. We did not take that opportunity, and we ended up taking it much later. But I think that it's really important in these times where you have authoritarian regimes trying to gain power and to take US hegemony down, and also to just influence the West. It's really important to take a clear stance. And I think that in the case of Austria and Switzerland and many others that are still neutral, they are not taking this stance. I think that Austria, which is sanctioning Russia, is not a neutral country, but they are having a coward policy by not giving weapons to Ukraine. Austria has a weapons industry. Austria could do a lot. Austria produces very high quality weapons. Austria could gain from it as well and sell more weapons to the world and so on. There are many opportunities for Austria, but it would also be the right thing to do. And it's not only Austria, it's also Switzerland and many other countries. I also think that South Korea and Japan are wrong not to send weapons. It's great that they send financial aid, but they need to also send weapons to Ukraine. So Austria is not alone in this case, and I'm sure that over time, also with your help, lobbying in Austria, I think that over time, these countries will choose the right side, because there is no in between. As you know, and as many say, and it's a very common statement, when there's an aggression, where there's an imperialist country invading a smaller country, if you're neutral, you're siding with the aggressor. And that's unfortunately what neutral countries are doing. And because of that, I try to call them out from time to time, because it's important to remind neutral countries that they are not neutral. They are in fact siding with the aggressor when being neutral.
Because Ukraine needs urgent weapons and Austria and Switzerland could deliver them,
Yes.
but we are not. We are not. And Finland, actually, it's a country which is much smaller than Austria. You have about, I think, 5 million people. We have 9 million. You're also very rich country. We are also very rich country, but we are not giving any weapons in 4 years of this long, terrible war. Nothing. While Finland, I think you have given billions of weapons in several packages.
Yes,
can you describe a little what you did as a country for this great nation of Ukraine? It's a heroic struggle, while Austria, a complete immoral bystander, has basically done nothing.
Yeah. So in the case of Finland, it's a bit specific because we don't count all of our aid to Ukraine in the official count, and we don't announce what we give. So the way we count, the way we do our accounting is everything that we have to replace, we count in the accounting, and things we don't have to replace, we don't. So as an example, let's say we give 10 tanks from our current tanks and 10 tanks from our reserve. It only counts as 10 tanks, even if we give 20, because everything that's from our old storage and reserve, we don't count. So no one really knows how much exactly Finland has given, but we know that we have given, I think, if I remember well, 32 packages of aid. In those packages, there have been engineering tanks, and there have been air defense systems, and there has been machine guns and all sorts of different aid. We also have Finnish startups that are operating in Ukraine and that are trying to develop their products, including kamikaze drones that use mines as payloads and things like these. Also, Finland has probably given some BMPs and so IFVs from the Soviet times, and we have given some Patria armored vehicles that we've seen being used in Ukraine. But no one knows exactly how much has been given, or we know the minimum number, we know the number of new products that has been given, but we don't know how much old equipment has been sent. And in some way it's good, because then Russia knows a bit less, but at the same time it's a bit sad that we do this, because then you have countries that actually give less than us, but that look like they have given more because they count every single penny that they give. But it is what it is. Finland is not the only country that has done a lot. Obviously, Denmark, Norway, many small countries, Sweden as well, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. There are many countries that have done tons for Ukraine. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank Poland for what they've done, because they're forgotten sometimes. Poland has had a weird policy in the last couple of years, and it hasn't always been perfect. But at the beginning of the war, Poland played the biggest role maybe in Europe. They gave really, really a lot during the first few months of the war, and it needs to be reminded, because Poland saved Ukraine in many ways. They sent lots of tanks, air defense, artillery, lots of equipment, including planes as well. So many countries have done a lot, and it's not too late. I think Austria and Switzerland, obviously it's not something that can change in a second, but it's not too late, and the war might last for a long time. So there are opportunities, and I know that you have companies that produce great weapons as well. So there are opportunities for more to be done, for sure.
I looked because I used this argument also in the Austrian debate here in the public, and I looked at the figures of the Swedish and Finnish Ministry of Defense, and roughly it was for the first 4 years, it was 7 billion for Sweden and 3.5 billion euros of weapons help. I'm just talking about bilateral weapons help from the side of Finland. Austria did 0.
Yeah.
This is the difference. And
Yeah.
also in Austria, you know that it's forbidden basically to collect money for drones or for any kind of
Mm.
support of Ukraine. And I guess in Finland it's not forbidden. You are now in NATO and you collect money as well to privately for defense efforts.
We do collect privately. Unfortunately, Finland has quite tight fundraising rules. So in Finland, you need specific permissions for every time you collect for more than 10,000 euros and so on. So Finland does collect for Ukraine, and we send trucks and generators and all sorts of things. But we have quite a complicated bureaucracy and donations. And the organization I work with is in Estonia, which has a bit less bureaucracy on that. But we are less limited now, and as a NATO country, we are more open to doing all sorts of things. But Finland is known to do these things a bit secretly. We're not a country that tries to rub it in Russia's face or to tell them exactly what we do. We prefer to do it behind the scenes. So we don't know everything that's being done, but some things are being done. But yeah, it is what
I
it
know
is.
the Finnish tradition of working more than talking, and you are like a bit of an example, different Finn, because you are very outspoken on
That's
Twitter,
true. That's
and
true.
I want to thank you for that one because for the debate that's very good.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
have in the Austrian debate also the issue that when I say we should join NATO, then everybody says, you know, for Finland, yeah, it's very clear because they have a border with Russia. But
Mm,
Austria is in the center of Europe, and we have all
mm,
these other NATO countries in the east, and they protect
mm,
us anyhow. So why should we make this effort to join NATO, spend more money when
mm,
anyhow the Slovaks, Hungarians, Finnish, Ukrainians are
mm,
defending us?
mm.
How good do you think is this argument?
Obviously, it's not a good argument, because if you're expecting others to help you or to protect you and you're not wanting to protect them, it's just an unfair argument. And obviously, it's not long term something that can work, and things change over time. We don't know who will side with who in 10 years or in 20 years and so on. With China growing and with all the instability that we see around the world, we don't know if some bad actor takes over Germany at some point or something like this. And no matter what happens, it's good to be protected and to be on the right side of history. And because of that, it's just better to have an alliance to count on, but that can also count on you. But also, one thing I think that Austria could work on, and I'm not a specialist on Austria again. I've been to Austria many times, and I love the food there, and I love many things about Austria, but I'm not a
And
specialist.
Joni,
But
you have a new friend in Austria, me. Next
yeah,
time you
exactly.
come to Vienna, please visit me.
I would love to. And but I think one thing Austria can also work on top of the neutrality, is the spying laws or the laws that are related to intelligence. And obviously, I'm not a specialist again, but I think the
You know very
combination.
much. You know a lot about our problems because
uh,
it's true. Spying in Austria is legal as long as you don't spy against Austria. You can harm the Finnish interest in Austria, and nobody will
exactly.
do anything against you. This is the
Yeah.
law in Austria.
And because of that, it creates an incentive for countries like Russia and China and even the US or anyone that is not European to operate from Austria. And we have seen with Christo Grozev in his files about Russian operations that in many cases those happen through Austria. There's some flight coming to Vienna or leaving from Vienna when there is a Russian operation because of that. And obviously, those are things that could be worked on to improve the situation for the rest of Europe, but for Austria as well. But yeah, many steps that can be taken to improve the situation. I think that what's happening in Iran and what's happening in Ukraine and so on over time will help at least some part of the Austrian population wake up to these issues. And I think that the chance of Austria one day joining NATO is much higher today than before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And I'm still hopeful that some of these issues will be taken care of over time.
Joni, Finland, Austria, and Sweden, we joined together in 95, the European Union
Yeah,
as neutral countries. And I know that there was Niinistö and Carl Bildt and our Prime Minister at that time, Wolfgang Schüssel, opposition leader, later Prime Minister. They were thinking at the first opportunity, when it's possible, to join NATO as well. That was a
yeah.
promise they made to each other. I was at the meeting itself because that was the idea of the conservative parties and why in Finland it was possible and in Austria not. What's your reading? What's the difference between our two countries? Why the Finnish have basically driven this change in the population, while the Austrians think, let the others defend us, we don't care.
I think in that case, the border actually plays a big role, because obviously we are directly threatened by 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia. We have, as you have also, we have a conscription, but we have a conscription where when you are serving, you know that there's actually a risk that you might actually end up at the border. My brother is doing his conscription right now in Finland, and I think that we had one difference between us and Austria in general is that we were forced in this neutrality back in the days. Austria maybe chose it a bit more, not in the sense that you chose it, but what I mean is you had it kind of like as a, it's part of the political identity, maybe a bit more than for us. For us, it was something that was forced on us by the Soviet Union, which is our enemy, while maybe Austrians don't see Germany or the Soviet Union as enemies in the same way as we see Russia as an enemy because of the border. And because of that, I think once the full-scale invasion started, it kind of liberated our opinions. Before what happened, the promise that Niinistö did when you were there, it's something that he could not have said out loud on TV in Finland in 1995. But when the full-scale invasion happened, it kind of liberated us to be able to oppose Russia more openly and to be able to give our opinions in ways that were not possible in 2021 or even less in 2013 or 1995. But I think in Austria, the change has been a bit smaller because you don't have Russia as a border and you don't have a clear enemy. Obviously, we know you have a clear enemy. Russia is a clear enemy. But for the Austrian population, maybe Russia is not perceived as much as an enemy as we perceive it as an enemy. And I think that plays into why it hasn't happened. And obviously, over time, your politicians, whether it's Kurz or other politicians in Austria, have had views that they have pushed about Russia and about neutrality that have spread, just like Orban's views spread in Hungary. These views have spread in Austria, and it's not something that can be taken out from the people's minds in 1 second. It's a slow process. We had a lucky situation because we had a young prime minister who was very open to the idea of NATO with Sanna Marin when that happened. But if you look at the parties in power in Austria, most of their voters are maybe a bit less open to the idea of NATO. And Austria, I mean, obviously because of your geographic location, you have been in a quite lucky situation. You don't have any big enemy on your borders, so the status quo maybe feels a bit more appealing to the Austrian population than to us.
Joni, we had an opinion poll because we are together in the European Union. We had an opinion poll when somebody attacks Estland or Estonia or Finland, yeah, should the Austrians help? And then it was only 25% of the people were in favor of helping you, Finnish or Estonians, yeah. But when the question was asked, would you like help from the European Union in case we are attacked, yeah, then it was about 70 or 80% of the Austrians were absolutely in favor of getting help, but not giving help.
Exactly.
What do you think about such attitudes in the Northern Europe?
Obviously, it's not a great attitude to have. I think that once your population experiences something, a real threat or something, I think that this attitude can change quite fast. I think that even in Ukraine before 2022, there was a lot of problematic opinions and a lot of problematic attitudes, but now there's less because they have unfortunately had to experience this war and it has woken them up on Russia. And I think if something big happens in Austria, Russia does some operation or something, this could wake them up. We had a case in Finland actually today. We don't know yet, but there's a Finnish organization called Your Finnish Friends, which is an organization that helps Ukraine. And they have an official address in Helsinki, and the building was burned down last night by a 17-year-old. And it was a whole building that was kind of burned down. We don't know yet why the 17-year-old did it, but it looks, at least the first idea I get is that Russia has paid someone to do it because that's what they do around the world. And it's not random that this building where this organization is the one that's burning. And I think obviously one thing like this is not enough to change the people's perception. But I think if enough threats or enough issues happen in Austria, maybe this could wake people up. Or if you need help for something and you get help, then maybe people will change their attitudes. But the good news is that, as we saw in Finland with NATO, these opinions can change quite fast. NATO had like 50% of people opposing it and 30% supporting it and 20% that didn't know when, just before the full-scale invasion. And then when the full-scale invasion started, suddenly we had almost 80% supporting joining NATO. So these things can change fast. And I think in Austria, they can change fast too. But you need something to happen for people to change this attitude, which is problematic.
Now we have 4 years of war. and Ukraine, and we have now 1 week of war in Iran. And what's your opinion about all the both wars? Let's talk first about Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I see that you are really very strong supporter of Ukraine with all your efforts. But do you think there's an opportunity now for liberation of Crimea? And will the European Union support Ukraine stronger after the Americans have done so little? It would be time for us to do more, I guess.
I think that obviously I would want all territories liberated in Ukraine, and Ukraine deserves all territories liberated. But I think that it's also important for us to remember that even if Ukraine does not manage to get 100% back, Ukraine can still win the war. Even with 80% of Ukraine, Ukraine can still win the war, because the objective Russia has is to turn Ukraine into a satellite state that is demilitarized and under Russian control. And as long as Russia fails to get that, and as long as Ukraine stays sovereign and militarized, Ukraine is winning the war. Obviously, there are levels to winning. A complete victory, a perfect victory, includes taking Crimea back. A less complete victory would, for example, be the status quo now, with Ukraine keeping the current territories but staying sovereign and militarized. There is no perfect scenario here, and I would really want Ukraine to take everything back. And I think that Ukraine has possibilities in the long run to take territory back, because Russia's economy will get more and more exhausted over time, and Ukraine is getting better and better with drones and with assault troops and so on. So if Ukraine manages to finish its core reform and to improve its mobilization and recruitment, it's not impossible for Ukraine to take some land back. I don't know how much they can take back, but they can take some land back from Russia. I think Ukraine is currently winning the war. I think it's a very tough war for Ukraine. It's very complicated. There are massive issues with manpower and recruitment. There are many issues that have to be dealt with. I think the current new Minister of Defense, Fedorov, is really good. He's making a good work. He's just arrived, and he's already making big improvements. I think the key for Ukraine to win this war won't be the territory. It will be the strikes on Russia's economy and hurting Russia enough. And there is no secret. The best way for that is to produce enough drones and missiles to destroy Russia's refineries and Russia's factories, especially defense factories. And that's something that Ukraine is working hard to do. Firepoint in Ukraine is working hard on that. And I think there is the opportunity for Europe to do something. We already help fund some of them, but if we would give more money to buy more missiles and more drones, then Ukraine could hit even more, and that is the best way to accelerate the end of the war. But unfortunately, it's a process that takes time. Even if there are 10 successful hits, it's not going to change anything. You need to do it over months and months of hitting constantly the factories and refineries, and then you can get results. I think it's achievable. I think what's needed is Ukraine needs to scale up the production. And for that, it needs our help. It needs our funding, but it also needs some of the production to happen inside of Europe, because the sites inside of Ukraine get hit by Russia a lot. But if we produce some of it in Europe as well, then it helps. And some of that is already happening. Some of the production is moving to the UK, to Denmark, and so on. I think that we're on the right path. We just have to be patient, and we need to do more and help more. And it's going
Joni,
to be
on the December, we have voted for 90 billion for Ukraine from the EU. That was very good. I guess Finland has supported that,
Yes.
obviously, and you supported as well. But now Orban's Hungary, he
Yeah.
has vetoed it in the last moment after
Yeah.
first he has agreed in order to make a stand for the election. What do you think about Orban's policy?
I mean, Orban is a traitor to me, and he deserves to sit in prison. But I'm not very worried about that, because Orban is a very cheap grifter and populist, and he has. When you look at the war, if you look at the last 4 years, he always blocks everything, and then he always ends up giving up, because he's not a very tough man. He likes to play a role and to look like he's like the student who tries to show to the teacher that he's a good student, but he's actually not such a good student. And that's what he does to Putin. He tries to prove to him all the time that he's a reliable person and so on. But at the end of the day, he always bends, because he needs Europe, and Europe is much stronger than him. So if France, Germany, and others go to Orban and tell him, you stop this, he ends up stopping it. And if he doesn't, we can always find a way to go around it and to get the money somehow with another mechanism. I'm not so worried about that. Obviously, it's bad for Ukraine, because it slows down the process for the 90 billion to arrive there. So it's not good, and it hurts Ukraine. But I don't believe that it's an issue in the long run. I think that it's just
There will be
Orban being
elections in
Orban.
April.
Sorry?
There will be elections in April in
Yeah,
Budapest.
exactly. He's trying to do his best for that, and that's one explanation of why he's doing it. I really hope that he loses the election, but he's gonna do his best to cheat and to win. So we have to be careful. And there are lots of people voting outside of Hungary who are Hungarians, including in Romania, for example, and those will also play a big role. And many of them vote for Orban. So it's a complex situation, but we have to hope that he's out after April. That would be great.
Absolutely, that's very great. And I hope very much so. So let's discuss about Ukraine's future in the EU and NATO. First about NATO. What is the opinion in Finland? You are a new member of NATO. Do you support that? Because that's very much one part of the ideological fundament of the war. Ukraine have this sovereignty to choose its alliance, and there's a big debate in Europe. There's a lack of invitation in some aspects.
Yeah.
And I'm advocating very much for Ukraine joining NATO, and I wanted to hear your opinion. What do you recommend for Ukraine's future security structure?
Finland wants Ukraine to join NATO, and I want Ukraine to join NATO, but Finland's official stance is still that the war needs to be over before that happens. And in some way, I understand this stance because, unfortunately, if we try to make Ukraine join NATO now during the war, it will kind of be another reason for Russia not to stop the war and to find other excuses and so on. I think obviously in the long run, Ukraine needs to be able to choose who they side with and to be sovereign enough to do that. But I think that that's not the key issue for now. Ukraine has succeeded at defending itself and defeating Russia without NATO. I think that in the short term, EU is more realistic for Ukraine, because we know that there are people like Orban inside of NATO who can block and veto the membership. So I think EU is more realistic in the short run. I think both in the medium to long run are realistic and could happen, but I think that for both, the war needs to end. And I don't think that it's important, but I don't think that any of them should be the priority for Ukraine now, in the sense that the priority now is to beat Russia and to end the war.
But let's discuss about the EU future, because the big debate has developed now the last weeks in Austria, if that's realistic after the Commission has proposed accelerated fast-track membership of Ukraine into the European Union, which I think is a very good idea. But the Austrian politicians have then said, oh, not so fast, and that's too fast. And Mrs. Meindl-Reisinger was in Kiev, and she said, oh, no, 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 we cannot sell to the Austrian population. What's the opinion of the Finnish people, and what's the debate in Finland? Do you in principle agree with fast enlargement of the European Union and inclusion of Ukraine into EU?
We do. For us, there's no big debate on that internally. For us, it's not something that causes a problem. Finland is okay with Ukraine joining Europe, so the European Union. We have no problem with that, and it's barely discussed in Finland.
I make one special proposal of mine, which maybe you followed, because I'm also a big fan of Finland joining the Eurozone. You have did that very early on. Sweden has not done it, and Denmark has not. And I'm actually as well for Poland to do that, and for Ukraine to adopt the euro, because we need more unity. We need more unity in the European Union, and we need more financial, economic stability. And one of the things which we have done in Kosovo and Montenegro after the war, we have introduced the euro. And it was much better for these countries, because the economic approximation and improvement and reconstruction was much, much better, much faster, and no kind of devaluations and all these things which we see in Turkey now. And because Finland is in the Eurozone and you are really very successful with it, why cannot Sweden can jump a little bit, or Denmark, or these countries? If I may ask you a little bit also for the Danish and Northern perspective, because solidarity, you are really great, and I'm really not criticizing Finland and Sweden because you both joined NATO. But when it comes to big things, it would be really wonderful to also join the Eurozone in case of Sweden or Denmark. And then, for example, Greenland would have the euro as well. And that would be helping us in our debate with Mr. Trump.
It would, and that's one reason why Finland joined and Sweden and Denmark did not join, is the geopolitical reason, because we were not in NATO back then, so we needed some ways to protect ourselves. And we knew that if we would be part of the Eurozone, then if Russia invades us, it becomes a problem for the Euro countries as well. So there was this aspect in why we joined. It was a bit pragmatic in a way. Unfortunately, because Denmark and Sweden are not neighboring Russia, they don't see this aspect at all. and they are in NATO, especially now that Sweden is in NATO. So they think that they will be protected no matter what. And those are countries, especially Denmark. I love Danish people. I have lived in Denmark, but Danish people are a bit, they love independence and they love to be able to decide for themselves. They are not huge fans of the EU. They don't mind the EU as a concept, but they're not huge fans of being told what to do. And they are a country that is doing very well economically and who doesn't want to share too much on that. They can share and they can help Ukraine, obviously, and they do. But they are not the country that is the most run by the idea of doing things together. They are a bit more selfish in a way politically, and I think that
But I
Denmark will
think
be
they were happy when we defended them in the case of Greenland early this year.
exactly, and hopefully maybe that can change. But they are not. There are many reasons why Danish people have not wanted to join the Eurozone, and I hope that that will change. And I would be for it. Obviously, I want Poland, I want Sweden, I want Denmark in the Eurozone, and I want Switzerland and Norway inside of the European Union as well, because I think that they are free riders by being outside, and it's not fair that they are allowed to join our meetings and enjoy many of our benefits without being in part of it. And same for Iceland. I think that all those places should join the European Union, and they would make the European Union stronger, but they would also benefit from being part of it. And so
that
I'm all
was
for it.
also in the question about Greenland, because Trump wanted to have it and he was quite bully against us and we defended it. And if Greenland returns to EU,
Sorry, yeah, I can you hear me? Yeah.
yes, I just have to change
no,
something here a little
no
bit
problem.
to have any echoes,
Yeah.
which I have. No, Greenland would be the perfect thing to join the EU fully, I think, because it's
I
not
agree.
so fully inside.
I agree, and obviously it's up to the people of Greenland to decide. But I think that they would probably be okay with it. And no, I'm by principle I'm for having all those in the EU. I have nothing against EU enlargement in that direction, and it would protect them and it would protect us. And it's also for the EU. The EU, if we would have bases with military presence in Greenland, that's beneficial to us. We have to stop, and actually that's something I've been advocating a lot for on Twitter and so on, is that I actually oppose my government's view, and I oppose the Canadian government's view on this new form of realism that they're pushing, this value-based realism, because I think that we should stop thinking that we are middle powers and we should stop accepting this idea that we are middle powers. I think we should push to become a big power. And I think that value-based realism is great at describing the way we have behaved after Trump took over. We have been these mid-sized countries who try to somehow survive and be friendly to everyone without being too friendly and so on. And this is a bit like Finlandization was during the Cold War. And I think that it's the wrong strategy. I think it's a great way to describe what we do now. But in the long run, we cannot survive like this. We cannot every 2 months be in a 1 millimeter close situation where we might lose Greenland or something. That's not a way forward. I think Europe needs its own armed forces. We don't need to replace our national armies. We need one quick response force on a European level that can provide security to a country that is being invaded. And those could be based in Greenland. They could be based in Estonia. They could be based near the borders that are tough. So we need that, and we need much more ambitious plans in terms of our role in geopolitics, but also on defense. And we need much more deterrence militarily. We need to depend on the US less, and we need to be strong enough to be able to do things on our own, because I think it's Hexeth who said that yesterday, or I don't remember, but someone said something that's true, that you cannot be free if you're not strong and feared. And unfortunately, we need that. We need to be stronger and we need to be more feared. And because of that, we need to improve our military deterrence, and we need to stop being a middle power. We need to become a big power, because that's what we are.
Joni, your vision is not to be like Yugoslavia, but to be your own superpower in the EU.
Exactly. We need to stop being the middle power.
Let me ask you a little bit about Trump, because you were very angry on him. I saw on some tweets and you called him a traitor, which I also do from time to time.
Yeah.
So that was very sympathetic. And I wanted to ask you, what's exactly your criticism on Trump when it comes to Ukraine and why you call him a traitor?
Trump is a liar, and he's a pathological liar. He lies on everything. And unfortunately, there are some things, including Ukraine, where he keeps his opinions. And despite some changes in rhetoric, overall, his behavior stays the same. And I think that it's extremely wrong from Trump to claim that he doesn't want to help Ukraine because he needs the equipment to pivot to Asia and to focus more on China. But at the same time, he has the equipment to attack Venezuela and Iran. So that's a lie and that's unfair. It doesn't mean that it's bad that he's attacking Iran. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that it's unfair for Ukraine to say that Ukraine cannot be helped, but we have enough to go to Iran and to Venezuela. That's hypocritical and that's wrong. And I think that Trump is on the wrong side of history. He could have been on the right side of history. If Trump would be a neocon that goes on Venezuela, Iran, and Russia at the same time, he could be supported by Republicans and he would gain a lot and he would hurt Russia, he would hurt China, and that would benefit the US and the US position in the world. So it's the sad thing is I obviously don't like Trump and I don't trust him in anything. I think he's a horrible person. But I think that with a small change on Ukraine policy, he could make his foreign policy be much more viable. But unfortunately, now his policy is still this unstable and weird policy where he's an interventionist on some countries and he's not in others. And on Russia, clearly, he doesn't want to pressure them. And that's something that's wrong and that's traitorous. And I think that it's something that needs to be called out constantly.
Joni, but now the liberation of Iran is coming and it's ongoing, obviously turning into regime change. It will be an intensive campaign, and it is also creating an opening now for the Europeans to support Ukraine much more
Yeah.
because the Russian resources are distracted. America is basically engaging in this war intensively because Iran and Russia are Axis allies. And so we have this opportunity now not to so much send another aircraft carrier to Iran, which the French are proposing,
Yeah.
but send this aircraft carrier from the French into the Black Sea and bomb Putin out of Crimea. That would
Yeah.
be the logic, actually, if we have a consistent grand strategy. What do you think about Europeans? We are running like the chicken now after Trump to Iran, where we anyhow cannot help so much, or we should really focus on the liberation of Crimea?
Yeah, I agree that we are running like chicken and we are following Trump. And obviously, I don't think that France is going to bomb Crimea or the Black Sea, but I think that our focus should be on Ukraine. And Trump has asked us to focus on Europe. So why don't we do it? We should do what Trump said. We should focus on Europe and we should focus on helping Ukraine more. And that would be the right thing. I think that the operation in Iran has both positive and negative sides for Ukraine. The negative ones include the oil prices going up, which can help Russia succeed longer and survive longer. So that's risky. And also all the Patriot interceptors, for example, that are being used by the US in the Middle East to counter Iranian missiles and so on. That is bad for Ukraine because there is already a shortage of this air defense inside the US in their stocks, so they cannot sell more to Ukraine if they use them in the Middle East. So there are downsides for Ukraine, but as you said, there are also upsides with the axis of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran being weakened. They lost Venezuela, they lost Assad, now they're losing Khamenei. That's very positive for Ukraine, and obviously it shows that Russian military equipment is also not that good because the US can just destroy it like that in a second. So there are upsides and downsides and risks for Ukraine in this. I think that you're right that Europe should focus much more on Europe and on Ukraine on this case. We don't have much of a role to play there. If Israel and the US want to go on Iran, they can go, and it has benefits and downsides for us. That's fine, but it's not like we can do much for it. And I think that it's a mistake for us to send one of our few aircraft carriers in Europe to the Mediterranean because it shouldn't be there. It doesn't help anything. So, yeah, what I fear about this Iran operation, just to get back on it, is that I support bombing Khamenei and I'm against the Iranian regime. But what I don't like is, I think if you go against Iran, you either don't go or you go fully. But you cannot go in between. And my fear is that Trump will do an in between because we saw what Trump did in Venezuela. He made an operation, and then after that, he decided to stop the operation and to negotiate with the people in power and to keep them in power. And unfortunately, it looks like it's also his plan in Iran. At least he has been talking about it now. If he doesn't manage to make a real regime change with bombings, he will try to make some sort of Venezuela 2.0, where he tries to take someone from the current leadership and to threaten them and to put them in power and to control them. And that would be very bad for the people of Iran, because the people of Iran, they deserve to actually have something else than Ayatollah and to have something else than this regime. So I think if you go for regime change, you have to fully go for regime change and not do some in between 50% regime change. And my fear with Trump is that he will go for a 50% regime change. And my fear with Netanyahu is also that, because Netanyahu benefits from having Iran that is still an enemy, but that is weak. He wants Iran to be weak, but he also wants to keep an enemy, because that gives him a reason to survive politically, and that gives Israel a reason to also be ready constantly and so on. So it's beneficial for Trump and Netanyahu to not fully eliminate the enemy in Iran, but to weaken him. And that's a bit scary for the people of Iran. I think the people of Iran, they deserve elections, they deserve actual democracy. And I would prefer that. And I would also prefer that in Venezuela. And that's my fear with the current operation. So yeah, we'll see how it evolves. But Europe should focus on Europe here. We should not focus on Iran. Iran is not really our problem. Our problem is existential, and it's the war in Ukraine, and we need to fully focus on that.
And we need victory there, and victory in Ukraine. Liberation of Crimea should also lead to the fall of Putin. Because on X, where we're both very active, you see a lot of these memes, yeah, where now after the fall of Khamenei, it's Putin's turn. So
Exactly.
what's your optimism here? What makes you optimistic that once we have won the war in Crimea, there will be also the fall of Putin coming up?
I think that Putin has made this war very existential for him, and that's also a reason why he cannot negotiate an end to the war. He keeps wanting to fight, because as long as the war is going, it's not a defeat. But once it stops, it becomes a defeat for him. And because of that, I don't think that Putin can survive the current scenario. Obviously, the war is not over. We don't know how it will end, but with the current scenario, Putin cannot survive. And Putin is also a bit old, and he's maybe a bit less popular than he has been in the past in Russia. So I'm quite optimistic. And as I discussed earlier, I think there is a way forward to win this war. And it's not based on territory, it's based on ruining Russia's economy with strikes, with Flamingo missiles, with Neptune missiles, with FP1 and FP2 drones. If Ukraine can triple or quadruple the production of these, and even more, and strike Russia constantly, then Russia's economy will shrink. And once their economy shrinks, they have to shrink the army as well. And that's when the opportunity comes to liberate occupied territories and so on. I think Ukraine should be patient. Ukraine should not try to liberate too much and waste too many men now, because Russia still has a big army in Ukraine. But if Ukraine manages to destroy the economy in the next 1 or 2 years, after that, it will be much easier to deoccupy the lands and to get much more back. And Russia will be much more desperate at that time, and much more can happen. So I'm optimistic. I think obviously this war is horrible and Ukraine is suffering because of it, but there are opportunities for Ukraine to get much more back and a better situation at the end of it. But it requires patience, and it requires dismantling Russia's economy. I think what's happening with the strikes is more important than what happens on the ground in terms of liberating occupied territories.
Thanks a lot, Joni. This was my podcast with Joni Askola, who is a Finnish fighter for Ukraine, a man who has from the first moment supported the Ukrainians and is also very active in the public opinion of the world with, I think, 90,000 followers on X, and is one of the persons who puts the finger in the wound of the Austrian neutrality, of the Swiss neutrality, Maltese neutrality. Cyprus has now seen actually that it's much better to be inside NATO, because they were attacked by the Shahid drones just this weekend. And also the Irish should obviously join NATO. And ultimately, I think Ukraine and the whole European should be in one defense alliance. This is the way forward. The Finnish have shown us the way. Your leadership is appreciated and unique. And thanks a lot, Joni, for coming to the show. One last statement from your side. What's your famous last words for victory?
My famous last words before, I just want to say thank you, Günther, for having me on the podcast. And my famous last words is that overall things are actually quite under control. Obviously, the war is horrible, and many horrible things are happening. But at the end of the day, our opponents are really good at propaganda, and they are much weaker than they claim to be or that they look. And we're much closer to victory, whether it's against Russia, whether it's against China, whether it's against Iran. We're much closer to victory, and the West and our values are superior. And because of that, we will end up winning at the end. We just have to be patient and believe in it and keep fighting.
Trust the Finn. Thanks a lot, Joni.
Thanks, Günther.
Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I will close the recording now.
The recording has stopped.
Thanks a lot. It was very good discussion. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was on YouTube Live. I will make it a podcast in the coming days, yeah.
Yep.
And we'll share it also the YouTube Live
Perfect.
immediately on
Then I
Twitter.
will share it once you make the YouTube videos. I will also share it on X and so on.
Perfect. Very much appreciated. If you want, we can also work on Instagram the coming days to share some clips and
I don't use Instagram, but
Okay.
but that's great. And yeah, thanks for having me.
It's welcome.